Hey guys. Okay, well, it's Monday night, which means I try to go live every Monday night with a free webinar. And tonight's webinar is all about letting our students drive. So I'm going to wait just a little bit before I get started and see who hops on. And like I always say, if nobody hops on, I will record this and share it out through email with my email list and any other places that I can share it on social media as well. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes. And if you are hopping on, I would absolutely love it if you would introduce yourself in the chat. Just kind of tell me who you are, where you're from, what you do maybe. That'll kind of give me an opportunity to personalize this. I love when you guys sign up for the webinar because you tell me a little bit about what you need and what you'd like to learn. That helps me know what to share, and I really do read those and think about kind of how I can make the webinar most meaningful for you guys for sure, because I know it's late in the evening, and I know that you take a lot of time to kind of sit and watch. So introduce yourself in the chat. Tell me where you're from. Sometimes the comments are a little laggy, takes a little bit to come through, but as soon as I see them, if you have a question or anything throughout the webinar, I will make sure that I try to address that. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know I have a lot to share and I always like to finish a little bit early. But tonight we're going to be talking about letting our students drive. And I'm going to share my screen because I do have some slides that I want to share with you guys. We're going to talk about some big ideas at the beginning, and then we're going to get into some really practical things. And I have some really cool things to share that you can take immediately and turn around and use with your learners, regardless of where the learning is happening. I know that's one of the big conversations right now is what is that going to look like in the fall? And I think the truth is nobody knows right now. That still kind of remains to be seen. So we have to start thinking about, as educators, how do we find ways to really engage our learners and help them understand that learning happens everywhere. I think that's really, really important. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. And I think one of the things that we've seen from this experience, this remote learning experience, is that a lot of our kids had no idea how to drive their own learning. They were used to being told how to do, when to do, what to do, where to do. And when somebody wasn't there to tell them that, they weren't sure how to react. They weren't sure what to do. And so I think one of the opportunities that has come out of this experience is for us to really focus on what does student-driven learning look like? How do we give them some of the control while still ensuring that the learning happens and that we're covering the standards and all of those things that we have to do as educators. Hey, Gay, how are you? I'm so excited that you're here. Very cool. I love to see you guys introduce yourselves in the comments. So if you're here, feel free to do that for sure. All right, well, like I said, I'm going to share my slides. And one of the things I wanted to start with a story, and I've shared this story so many times. If you've ever heard me speak, you've probably heard that. Oh, there's an Amber Alert going off, I think, on our phones. Yes. Perfect timing. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to start with, like I said, is a story. And that is just a story of my own son and when he started to drive. You know, we have a senior this year. We have a senior, a sophomore, and a 7th grader. Now we have a graduate, a junior, and an 8th grader. And when our senior first started to drive, it was a really difficult time for me as a mom. It was so hard to kind of let go and let him have that opportunity to go out on his own and have a little bit of control. And so we did the parent talk class. And when we were teaching him how to drive and giving him all the things, I was just a helicopter mom, to be honest. I was all over him. And you can see this is actually a picture of him here when he was driving down the highway. And we live in a really small town outside of a larger town here in Texas. And our son actually, the highway that connects our town to Waco is really a busy highway, and not only a busy highway, but a very dangerous highway. Lots of accidents happen there. And so I was really scared about letting him drive on that highway, just so much fear. And I just didn't feel like he was ready. And there was a time that we were actually in Dallas, and I had told him, we were at a baseball tournament, and I said, hey, if you can drive on the interstate, then I'll feel much safer letting you drive on on the highway that he has to drive on. And so as I told him, I said, hey, why don't you take me to the store and drive on the interstate and we'll just see how it goes. And he said, okay. He was a little bit like, I'm not sure this is a great idea, but he was okay. And so we get on the interstate and I am just all over him. Like, hey, turn your blinker on, use your blinker. Are you even looking at your mirrors? Did you even adjust your mirrors? Are you buckled up? Hey, you've got to go with the flow of traffic. Slow down. I was just giving him all of this advice and I was trying to give him all of the things that I knew and needed him to do in order to be able to drive. And so at one point he exits and he takes an exit I did not tell him to take. And I was like, what are you doing? I didn't say exit here. And he gets out of the car and he was like, Mom, I cannot do this with you in my ear, just telling me every single thing to do. I can't drive. I know how to drive. And I always laugh. And every time I tell this story, I have to tell this part because it was so funny. We get out of the car and we're kind of arguing back and forth. And I was like, just, okay, get back in the car. It'll be fine. And he was like, I'm not driving with you. I'm not doing this. And I said, you will be respectful. And he goes, okay, ma'am, I'm not driving with you. And I remember that moment so well because he had just decided, I can't do this with you in my ear. And so we came home. He was frustrated. And a couple of weeks later, I had asked him if he wanted to get in the car and go with me to town. That's what we say. So he was like, absolutely not. And I said, look, I'll let you drive. And he was like, no, I've already learned that lesson. And I said, I really will not say a word. And so we get on the highway that I was so afraid of. And what I realized that day when I let him drive was that when he needed my help, when he had questions and when he wasn't sure, he asked. He would say, Mom, do I need to turn here? Or Mom, do I go with the flow of traffic? Or what lane am I supposed to be in? He would ask those questions. He knew when he needed me and he knew what I needed to do for him. And so I always like to share that story because that was such a big moment for me as a mom to realize that he didn't need me to give him every single step. But he did know when he needed me and he was willing to ask. And I think our learners are the same way. So I want to start this webinar by saying, I understand that letting them drive their learning is easier said than done. It's not easy because we're so used to being in control and we're used to being in the driver's seat. But I hope that tonight you'll get some really practical things that, like I said, you'll be able to turn around and use immediately. You know, in A Meaningful Mess, the book that I wrote a couple of years ago, right after Genius Hour, I used an acronym to talk about student-driven learning and kind of what that looks like and how it can be. I think it's called an acronym. Now I'm second guessing that. Whatever. My brain's not working all of a sudden. But I used the term DRIVE to talk about student-driven learning and the things that can come out of that. And so I want to go through each one of these because, like I've said so many times throughout this whole remote learning experience, we can choose to see this as an opportunity or an obstacle. It is an obstacle for sure, but there are opportunities that have come along because of this. And I think student-driven learning is one of those things. So when we think about letting our students drive, I think the first thing we need to realize is that they will be more determined. That determination, because they want to show us that they're able to do it. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes when you change the rules of the game and you put learning in their lap, oftentimes they aren't sure how to react. So they'll react with an unwillingness or they'll react with apathy. They'll be apathetic and not want to engage. But we just have to kind of stay the course because they just have to understand what that type of learning looks like. You know, one of the things that we say most often about this generation of kids is that they're spoon-fed and that they're coddled. Well, the only way to fix that is to stop spoon-feeding them and stop coddling them. And that takes time because, of course, if you let me choose in a professional development experience, you know, if I'm just going to sit there and take in the information or if I'm really going to have to engage and invest, at first, I'm always going to go for the just dump the information in and I'll just take it and do what I want with it. But once I get into it and I realize how beneficial those learning experiences are where I'm engaged and I'm invested in the experience, that all changes. But we have to get to that place. So that determination will come. And once they get there and they're determined to show you that they can do it on their own, That's a game changer. But again, that takes time. I think relevance, right? When students drive their own learning, they find relevance that they have difficulty finding when someone else is driving their learning. And we all know that when learning is relevant, that's when it's meaningful. And I always say, I don't care if it's remote learning or if it's in the classroom. If it's not meaningful, it's a waste of your time and theirs. And so that relevance piece is really, really important. And you don't always have to find the relevance. Sometimes that can be up to them. Why is this relevant to you? Why is this important beyond the walls of the classroom? I think that's something we realized kind of early on with the remote learning experience, was that opportunity to make those relevant connections beyond the walls of the classroom. This is a big one, independence. And this goes along with kind of that spoon-fed conversation we just had. You know, our students being independent and being able to drive their own learning is a little bit difficult, like I said, when they have been dependent on us for so long. We see that so many times with students who have a lot of help at home, or they aren't given the opportunity to do things on their own. They are dependent on other people. And sometimes we wonder why that is. But when you look at how we've done school for so long, of course they react that way. That's how we play the game. I come here, I sit in a seat, you dump things in my brain, and I regurgitate that. That's how we play the game. But when they drive their own learning, they learn how to be independent. And that's so important. You know, our son is getting ready to go off to college, and that whole independent conversation of, you know, there's going to be things you're going to have to do by yourself, and you're going to have to figure these things out and problem solve. Those have been big conversations, because as the first child, I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I did a lot of things for him that I probably shouldn't have done. But, you know, I was a new mom and I was learning, and I just wanted to make everything easy for that sweet baby. Okay, so moving right along, I think this is a big one, and this is value. When they value the learning, they're much more willing to invest. So when we think through, you know, I always say, you know, my students, when I kind of had that big aha moment of what I was doing wasn't meaningful in my classroom, my kids were looking at me like, you can do this all day long. We're not buying what you're selling. And the reason they didn't is because they didn't find any value in it. And I mean, we think about ourselves, think about yourself when you're shopping. If you don't find value in it, if it's not something you need, you're probably not going to grab it off the shelf. And if you do grab it off the shelf, but it's not valuable to you, you're never going to use it. And the same is true for learning. We have to give them opportunity to find value in what they're learning. And that only happens when we give them that opportunity to drive, for sure. And we're going to talk about some practical ways to make that happen. And then finally, that whole empowerment piece. We're going to talk about the 3 E's at the end of this webinar: how to engage, get to that willingness to invest, design an experience, the opportunity to learn, and then empower them through those connections that they make. But when learners are empowered, that's when they see learning for what it really is. And I think for so long, one of the things that we've learned here is that our students have seen learning as a place, right? They've seen learning as school. And what they have to begin to understand is that learning is an experience. Learning is something that you do all the time. They just don't see that as learning because they associate it so much with the school experience and what school looks like. So empowering them to take their learning beyond the walls of the classroom and to make those important connections, that's huge, and something that we have to make a priority moving forward. So I want you to think about those words kind of as we go through this. I want to show that slide one more time. These are all of the things that I feel like can come out of letting our students drive their own learning. Now, one of the things I also want to say is that when you give your students that opportunity to drive their learning, it can be scary, but remember, you're still going to be in the passenger seat, right? If things get out of control or things get a little scary or it's not working, you can always reach over and grab the wheel. But you're reaching over to grab that wheel to correct the situation and then let go again. That's just what it's going to have to look like from now on, I think. And so as we kind of go through, I want you to be thinking about these words and how some of the practical things that I'm going to share with you guys can result in some of these things. So share with me really quickly in the comments, if you're on live, which one of these really speaks most to you? What would you like to see your students experience? If you had to pick one, what would you choose to really kind of focus on and make a priority in your classroom? And I'm going to try to have a little bit of wait time. I really suck at that, but I'll wait just a couple of minutes. Which of those things really stand out to you and would be something you would really want to make a priority in your own classroom? And again, sometimes the comments lag, so if it takes just a second, just be patient with me. Okay, I know you guys are there because I see you. So if you just joined, we're looking at these words and we're talking about, we're commenting, what would we most like to see in our classroom? What would we, or outside of our classroom, right? What would be the biggest priority for your students? Yes, value and relevance are similar, Allison. Because if something is relevant to you, you're probably going to find value in it. So yes, such a great point. Empowerment. Love it. It's awesome. So thinking through this, even if you don't comment, just think through, these things. If our students had these things, how much more meaningful would remote learning have been if these were already in place? And what will we do with that information moving forward? Allison, I'm so excited that you're here from San Angelo. My son is actually going to Angelo State for college. So super excited that you're here for sure. Okay, moving on. I'm going to get back to my slides. We went through each one of these. So let's talk now about what should they drive. When we talk about student-driven learning, what are some things that they can have some control over? And don't panic. Don't be like, I'm not trying to let my kids know what they learn. We're going to talk about that and when there's a place for that. But the reality is there are times that they can decide what they will learn. But I think the biggest things that they can have control over are how they will learn it and where they will learn it, and also how they will show what they know. And so thinking through those things and how we can use those to give our students voice and choice so that they're given that opportunity to drive their learning, what does that look like? How do we do that? And again, one of the reasons that I put the what will you learn is I'm a big fan of passion-based learning. And I'm only that way because I saw the power of it in my own classroom. And so as an educator, I really saw that my students could learn the standards and could learn the things that I needed them to learn through PBL. And for us, PBL was passion-based learning. And so last week I did a webinar, and you guys are welcome to find it on the Facebook page. I also sent it out in today's website. So thinking through that PBL, whether it's project-based learning, problem-based learning, or passion-based learning, that's a great opportunity for them to control what they've learned or what they will learn. All right, ticking right along. Let's talk about digital choice boards, because these are a great way to let your students drive the learning. And I want to show you exactly how to set one up. And so I don't know if you guys have heard of slidesmania.com. Does anybody use slidesmania.com? Have you heard of it before? I'm going to drop that link in the comments so that you guys can access it. Okay, it won't let me share that. I'm not sure why, but I'll drop it in there later. But this is a great way to set things up. So let me show you kind of what this looks like. So when you go to, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to share another screen with you guys. Okay, so when I go to slidesmania.com, looks like this. Hopefully you can see that, yes. And when I go to education, they have all of these different slides. So first of all, if you present or you share ideas or you need slides or your students need slides, these are very cool, and they're different than just the slides that we see all the time, right? They're not the same old. There's a variety, and I'm a huge fan of Slides Mania. Now, what's really cool about this is they have a digital board game, but they also have this challenge board. So I wanted you guys to see where I got this. And on this page, they actually have a video that walks you through how to set it up. And then they have the actual slides for you to use. So you can either use it in PowerPoint or Google Slides. Obviously, when you use it in Google Slides, you're just going to make a copy of it, and then it'll be yours to do whatever you want to with it. So I want to show you guys kind of what it looked like when I created one. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. Sorry, it's like back and forth, but I want to make sure that you guys can see this and kind of think through it. Okay, so this is what my slide looked like. So I took this experience because I recently designed an experience for my daughter around hurricanes. And so you can see here, and I just used their icons. You could change those icons. You could make this look different. But I took 4 big ideas. So if they were going to control what they've learned or what they want to learn, they could choose what is a hurricane, hurricane names, eye of a hurricane, or hurricane categories. Then they could choose how they learn it. They could watch a video. They could look at Wonderopolis. And if you haven't heard of Wonderopolis, just do yourself a favor and make sure that you look at that for sure. It's amazing. They could listen to a podcast. They could read an article. Then they could show what they know through creating a movie, recording a podcast, writing a story, or designing a slideshow. So just on this one slide, they have all of these options. Now, this is set up in a really cool way because what happens is when I go to present this, what happens is when they click on the link, it will then show, you can put text here, you can put a video, you can put an image, whatever you want to include there, so that each time they click on a different link, they see whatever it is that they're clicking on, if that makes sense, which is very, very cool and really, really easy to do because they've pretty much already created it for you. And all they've done, and you could do this yourself, is they've taken it and they have linked this page to a certain slide. So when I click this, it's going to take me to slide 3. When I click here, it's going to take me to slide 6. Again, you'll want to watch the directions because there are some things like you have to use their, you have to use the slide master to kind of create this. But just a really, really cool thing. Allison says they just released the game board, and that's exciting. And I love that you've used this, Allison. So easy to create. And this is a great way to do whether it's remote or whether it's in your classroom. And I just think it would be so cool if we get to a place to where those two things aren't that different, that it doesn't matter whether we're in the classroom or it's remote learning, that we just teach this way, that our students drive their learning and we are there to facilitate. And that doesn't mean we have to be in a classroom, but if we are in the classroom, that's a great bonus, but that this can happen anywhere, anytime. And so definitely something to think through. I want to show you one other kind of setup of what this can look like before I move on. Okay. And I set this up a little bit differently. So instead of doing the, what am I going to learn? How am I going to learn it? And how will I show what I know? I set it up in kind of different big ideas. So I took some 7th grade math standards and made them the focus. So scale drawings, volume, circumference, area, and perimeter. So we're talking geometry here. And they could choose on each one, either I totally get it or I'm lost. And if they click on I totally get it, it might be an enrichment piece. It might be something that takes them a little deeper. Or if they click on the I'm lost, they get something that kind of, maybe it's a little tutoring video. Maybe it's something that kind of helps them understand it in a different way, a different perspective, whatever that is. But you could do this so that they could control that, right? Let them learn how to advocate for themselves. Instead of you saying, you don't understand this, or you must be lost, let them tell you, I get it, or I don't get it. And if you set this up really in an intentional way, it'll help them understand, oh, I chose the wrong one, or I chose the right one, right? If I click, I totally get it, and I realize this is really difficult and it's not what I thought it was going to be, then the reality is I probably didn't get it as well as I thought I did. And I may need to figure it out a little bit more. So this is a really cool way to set it up as well. Both ways involve them driving their learning, them making choices. And it's fun, right? Like this is just a cool way to learn. And it kind of lets them dip their toe in the water of driving that learning and kind of thinking through those experiences and owning some of that, if that makes sense. Okay, so you guys tell me really quickly what you think about. Denise, I do see your comment. So if you can't figure out how to comment, I think you just did. What do you guys think about the choice boards? Is that something that you feel like is meaningful, something you can use? What do you think? And I'll wait just a second for your comments to kind of pop up. I'm a huge fan of this just because it's already created. And I know how busy you guys are and how much as educators you have on your plate. And so anything that is kind of something that's meaningful and we can use immediately and turn around and just kind of edit or change is a win-win, right? Because it gives us that opportunity to do some different things. I'm so glad, Gay Beth, that you love this. I hope that it's something you can turn around and use. And if you have any questions or you want to collaborate on ideas of how to set this up, I would be more than happy to help you. Denise, you're from right down the road. That's very, very cool. And I'm glad you can see the comment section now. So I'm happy you are here. Okay, so again, slidesmania.com. I don't know why Facebook won't let me share that, but slidesmania.com, and then setting this up just in a way that's meaningful and intentional, and whatever that looks like for you and your learners. And Denise says she thinks it would be great for younger kids that are still learning how to make choices. I think that's so true. And I think we have some older kids who don't know how to make choices as well. And so thinking about who are my learners and how do I want to set this up? How far into student-driven learning are they able to go right now? So Lisa, I'm so glad. I hope that you'll be able to use this for sure. Okay, so definitely choice boards, and you could create your own. This is just really a springboard. That's another thing I love about things that are already created. A lot of times for me, that's just a springboard into doing it myself. Like I'll use that for a little bit, but then I start thinking through, oh, wait, I could create this myself and make it even more personalized and do it in a way that makes even more sense for me and my learners. So definitely something to think about and something that you could consider using for sure. All right, so ticking right along, and I'm so sorry that I have to go back and forth between screens. I know it can get a little annoying, but this is that other slide that I shared. I wanted to make sure that I mentioned the Jigsaw Method, and this is actually linked, and I'll share with you guys these slides. But this is actually linked to Cult of Pedagogy. If you've ever, I just love to hear her speak and share. It's Jennifer Gonzalez. She always has great ideas and just just really good content. She's amazing. So the Jigsaw Method, she explains on this video, and it was actually from a while back, I think 2015, but she explains different variations of it. And she also, she does some troubleshooting of, if this happens, here's what you should do. So I want you guys to take some time after this, not tonight, when you have time, and watch her video, because I watch it often just to remind myself how Jigsaw works. And if you haven't heard of Jigsaw, it's really an opportunity for learners to practice teaching each other, right? So oftentimes when you can teach someone else, that's when that deep understanding takes place. And so what happens is students get into a group, and then they all become experts in a different area. They meet with the experts in their same area to make sure they're all clear. And then they come back and they teach each other. And so when they're doing that, they are really getting to that deep understanding. And again, you can watch the video, and I didn't want to go too deep into this because I know so many of you have used the Jigsaw Method before, some variation of it. But one of the things that I would say is that you could use the Jigsaw Method with what we just looked at, right? So you could use those big ideas. You could give each kid an opportunity to be in charge of that and have them teach each other, because when they teach each other, man, that's what some real learning happens. And let me say this, because I advocate often for gifted learners. I do a lot of work in the GT world. There's a big difference between the Jigsaw Method, students teaching each other because it's meaningful and because it's an opportunity to really go beyond that surface level learning, and tutoring another student. I'm a big believer in the fact that gifted learners should not have to teach other students. One of the reasons I believe that is because they deserve meaningful learning experiences. And one of my core beliefs is that every learner deserves the opportunity to experience new learning. And if they're having to spend their time often teaching other kids just because they are ahead and they understand it, totally not okay. And I'll just say that out loud. It's not okay. They deserve new learning experiences, but that's not what the Jigsaw Method is. So I think when you watch this video and you kind of consider what might this look like, and think about what might this look like virtually? How could I do this? I don't know if you guys know, but Zoom actually has breakout rooms. So you can take your meeting, your big group meeting, and you can actually put kids into breakout rooms. And so that they're in smaller groups, and it's not that difficult to do. If you need help with that or you want to learn more about that, I would be more than happy to help you do that. So Jigsaw Method, that can happen virtually. It can happen in the classroom. There's just so many different ways that you can do that. And right now we have to be really intentional about thinking about both. Okay, using Flipgrid. You guys knew I wasn't going to go through this whole thing and not talk about Flipgrid, right? I'm just a huge fan. I think Flipgrid is just super powerful and a great tool and so easy to use. It makes sense to use it. So I want to talk specifically about how to use Flipgrid in a way where learners can drive and they have some control over what they do within a grid. So if you haven't heard of Flipgrid, it's a tool where students can collaborate, communicate, be empowered, and be engaged through video. And so you as an educator can share video and content and, so many things with them. And then they can turn around and they can reply or they can share what they've learned or what they've done through a video response. And then their peers can give them feedback. I always say it's almost like Flipgrid was made for remote learning. If I was going to set up a learning experience anywhere right now for my students, it would be Flipgrid. It's just, it gives those kids who are, a lot of times when we think about being on a Zoom call or a Google Meet, that's great. And there's a place for that. But when you think about your learners who are quiet or who don't respond immediately, they need some time to think. That's not always the greatest place for them, because who's going to respond in a Zoom or a Google Meet? The same kids that are going to respond in a classroom really, really quickly. Those kids who their hand goes right up, they're going to speak first on a Zoom call. And then you're going to have your kids who sit back and are never going to engage. That willingness to invest won't be there because they know who's going to speak. They know who's going to talk. Where on Flipgrid, they have time to kind of let what you're asking them to do sink in. They have some time to think about it, and then they can respond and then respond to each other. So I think there's a place for both. I just think only using one, if you're only using Zoom or you're only using Google Meet, we have to think about those kids who are never going to respond in that type of situation. All right, so looking at the screen right now, you guys can see Flipgrid is just so powerful. So I don't have my glasses on and I'm getting older. So let me make this bigger so I can see. You can see I've showed you kind of where to create a new topic. And so that's really easy. When you go into Flipgrid, you create a grid and there are topics within that grid. So your topics could be your different weeks, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Your topics could be your different units. So it might be unit 1, unit 2, however you want to set that up. That's another thing I love about Flipgrid is it's what works best for you and your learners. So you can create those topics and then you can add media. So you can add a video, you can add images, you can add GIFs, you can add Kahoots, Wonders from Wonderopolis. I mean, you guys can see right over here all of the different things that you can add. Now, at the bottom here, this is where student-driven learning comes into play on Flipgrid. It says topic attachments. And if you look really closely, I don't know if you guys can read that, but it says attach up to 9 external links. So you can add YouTube videos, you could add Wonders, you can add articles, whatever you want them to access, and you give it a title, and then you put the link. And so this is where you can say, choose 2, choose 3, choose 4. You could give them up to 9 different things to explore and experience, but let them choose what it is that they want to learn more about. Maybe you in the focus topic that you share, everybody sees that and everybody does that. So whatever your big idea is, or whatever it is you're really wanting them to learn, that's there. But those supplemental things, or those where they can dig deeper and they can kind of go off and explore, put that in the topic attachments so that they have some choice. And then just be really intentional about telling them what you expect. I need you to do 2 of these or 3 of these, or whatever that looks like. So what do you guys think about using Flipgrid for student-driven learning? Something you might be able to use as well? I love seeing the comments come through. It makes me feel good, and then I know you guys are there. It's always so weird just talking to a computer. I don't care how many times I do it. So awkward. Good, Allison. I'm so glad. And I think so many people know about Flipgrid. Like it's a big deal. I mean, if you haven't heard of Flipgrid, you definitely have to check it out. But I think sometimes we aren't intentional about thinking, how can we use this in a way to give our learners choice and let them choose what they want to learn about or how they want to go deeper. So I just wanted to really, really focus on that. It has changed and improved lately. I'll tell you this, Flipgrid, as an ed tech company, is probably one of the most responsive to what teachers need and want. They just recently added, it's been a little bit, but they added a whiteboard feature when all of this kind of happened with remote learning, and it was just so powerful. And they're just always so responsive to what teachers need and want and what they hear them asking for. Oh, perfect. I can't wait for you to try it either. You'll love it. Absolutely love it. And again, if you ever need any help, or you just want to think through something like, hey, this is what I want to do, I absolutely do not mind hopping on and helping. We can always hop on a Zoom call, whatever that looks like, or whatever you need. I just want to make sure that when I say these things, that it's not just a big idea, but it's something you can actually do. Oh, that's exciting, Allison. A remote session about Flipgrid, probably. Very, very cool. Okay. So thinking about using Flipgrid, not just using it, but using it in order to really let your students drive and let them kind of have some choice and voice in their learning. All right, I wasn't going to do this webinar without talking about the 3 E's and designing blended learning experiences, because I think that's probably where we're headed, is we're going to have to learn how to set things up in a way where whether our students are at school, whether they're at home, or whether they are in a hybrid situation where they're at home some of the time and they're at school some of the time, we got to have something that works regardless. And this, I feel like, does. And so I've talked about this almost every webinar, but it's just near and dear to my heart. And it's just setting learning experiences up this way. I'm going to be intentional about engaging my students. What will I do to get to that willingness to invest? What will I design as the opportunity to learn? So what will the actual experience be? And I feel like this is where the student-driven learning can come into play. This is where we want to think through that opportunity to learn, but how will I give them choice and voice in that opportunity? What will that look like? Am I going to give them a couple of different ways and let them choose? Can I do the Flipgrid thing? Will it be a challenge board? What will that look like? So that's that experience opportunity to learn. And then the empower piece. So making connections and really that valuing things, valuing the things they learn, that happens as a result of those connections. If they can't connect what they've learned beyond the walls of the classroom, it's not meaningful. And so that empower piece is huge and something that we have to be intentional about. So engage, experience, empower. And I have just harped on the idea that I think if we as educators could learn how to design weekly experiences where we look at our standards from kind of a bird's eye view. And I'm not saying that it's not valuable to dig into your standards and look at them up close. That's super valuable. But I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in that we forget to look at them from that bird's eye view and see the connections, right? Like, oh my gosh, they're learning about catastrophic events in science and they're learning about the hurricane of 1900 in social studies. Why are those things not being taught together? That cross-curricular, those big connections, those can happen so much easier when we make it a priority to look at our standards from up top, and we can kind of see those connections and the things that need to happen. So there is a website. It's just bit.ly/DMLE, Designing Meaningful Learning Experiences 2020, and everything you would need to make this work is there. So you guys check that out. Feel free to use it. Feel free to ask any questions. If you need something from me, feel free to let me know. All right, I'm looking at the comments, just trying to figure out. Yeah, that's a big conversation, Denise, is those rural learners, what will that look like for them if they don't have access to internet? And I think that conversation is just going to continue to grow, because we will have to develop solutions around that. Regardless of what it looks like in the fall, technology improves the situation. And we can't very well, there's been comments, and I can't remember who said it, but just about, if you're grading those things, we have to be careful that we're mindful of the fact that some kids have access to things others do not. And to give a kid a different grade because they didn't have the resources that another kid had, that's not okay. And we have to kind of figure that out, I think, as an education system, and what that's going to look like. Such a great point. Okay, so definitely check out that website, and I'll put it in the comments as well. I want to make sure that we continue this conversation. I just love visiting with you guys every Monday and sharing, and sometimes I'm all over the place and it's loud at my house, but it's just real life, right? We're just trying to make it through like everybody else. But it's always fun to hop on and share, hopefully practical things that you guys can think about and use. But I just want to say that before I hop off, one of the things that we're going to have to be really mindful about, I think, when we start making decisions about the fall, is student-driven learning. Because if we have learned anything through this experience, it has been that a lot of our students were not prepared to drive their own learning. They just weren't created. That's not how we've played the game. But now that we've seen that, we can't just look the other way. And gosh, I hope that we don't just go back to the way that things have always been. That's not to say that there weren't things in place that will continue to work. But if we don't use this experience to learn from it and to take this opportunity to create some change and figure some things out in education, I feel like that would be a big mistake. So my contact information is there. Man, it's a hard time to be an educator, but it's also an exciting time to be an educator. You guys have the opportunity to kind of step into a space and create some big change. And so I would love for you to come back every week and continue this conversation with me. You can always visit my website at andymcnair.com. That is where I post all of my webinars. I send them out on my email list every week. And if you miss it for any reason, as long as you're on the email list, you will get it. I'm so glad that you guys are inspired. I love your comments. It makes me so happy. And I am going to really quickly put that one link in here. Hopefully it'll let me, because I want you guys to be able to access that. And I just want to wrap up by saying how much I appreciate you as educators. I know, like I said, it's a difficult time. But I just appreciate so much the work that you're doing and the work that you'll continue to do. And we're all in this together. And I want to be there to support you in any way that I can. So thank you so much for the work that you do. And I will be back next week, and I will send that topic out very soon. So thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon.